This is Reah, and this is Just the Who of Us, where we talk about a range of topics, including life events, current events, spirituality, entertainment, family relationships, as well as answering listener questions and more.
Good morning, welcome. Well, I guess it might not be morning everywhere when you're listening to this, but welcome back to Just the Who of Us podcast. Today with us, we have Nidia Valadez, mental health counselor specializing in anxiety, depression, trauma, ADHD, and couples work, which is so absolutely perfect for having a guest on this podcast because, as you guys know, as listeners, I talk a lot about a lot of these things, trauma, ADHD, and anxieties in particular. And so when I met you, so we met on school, and when I met you and you told me what your focuses were, I was like, this is absolutely written in the stars because you are really the perfect guest to have on for the things that I like to talk about. And as someone who has been diagnosed and experiences more than one of these things, it's just really exciting to have someone come on that I can talk to in kind of a personal and professional capacity that not only my listeners but myself can really relate to. So, thank you so much for being here this morning with us.
Thank you. Yeah, and I feel the same way. It's rare when you find somebody that shares the same interest or has gone through the same journey as you. And I
Yeah.
really believe that as mental health professionals, in order to connect with our clients, we have to do the work first, right?
Yeah, yeah, it's that's such a true statement. And I've kind of had briefly a relative conversation before in terms of like coaching and things. You can obtain education in certain fields, but if you don't have the life experience, it's not as easy to connect because you're just kind of feeding information without the emotions that go behind it. And so
Right.
I completely agree with that.
Mhm.
So today, you and I are going to talk a little bit about your personal to professional journey, and I also want to bring up the fact that we had so much to talk about that we have decided to break this up into like four conversations because there are so many things that not only can we can touch on, but so many things that I think my audience would benefit from us having a conversation about. So welcome not only as your first time on here, but as another repeat guest.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I'm excited about this.
So first, I want to talk a little bit about who you are, where you started in your personal life that kind of gave you this aha moment, like, you know what, this is what I want to do. This is why I want to help people. Tell us a little bit about that, your kind of beginning of your personal journey into your career.
Yeah, and I have to say before I get started that there's like maybe three stages that I can identify that I went through as I graduated, well, maybe as a child, and then when I graduated, and then as my practice has evolved.
Hmm.
But again, my name is Nidia Valadez. I'm 37 years old, and I have two daughters, a 6-year-old and an almost 8-year-old. She'll be 8 um, at the end of September. So we're excited for that. And I've been
Yeah.
married for 10 years. It'll be 11 on October 11. Um, yes,
Wow.
and 11 is my lucky number.
I
So
see.
I'm excited about the 11th year. Yeah. So I guess my story starts when I was 14 years old. So I was born in Ciudad Juarez, Mexico, which is border to El Paso, Texas. And at 14, I and my parents divorced when I was about 4 years old. And my dad was offered a job in McAllen, Texas, which is very south of Texas. And he was fixing to move over there. So I was having issues at school. I was skipping a lot. I was in middle school. I was in seventh grade, I believe. No, eighth grade. And you know, based on that, like my mom felt like she couldn't handle me. My dad was like, well, how about she comes and lives with me? And I actually have a great relationship with my dad. And I felt like, yeah, that's what I want to do. So I moved with my dad and I started ninth grade, not knowing English. I entered what it's called English as a Second Language program, ESL.
Yeah.
So I was there for a couple of years. And my first year that I moved to McAllen, I began having these fainting spells, and I call them fainting because I was actually conscious, but I was sort of not like in charge of myself, right?
Yes. Yes.
And so that's where my journey began. I was in school when that happened. So I was taken at the nurses station. I was there for a couple hours. I only had an aunt and an uncle that lived in that city along with my dad. And my aunt and uncle work at the high school. So my aunt was a custodian and my uncle was an ROTC teacher.
Okay.
So my aunt was told, right, like what was happening. And she met me at the nurse's office, and then they called my dad. Long story short, I ended up at the ER. They thought I had taken a drug, that I was pregnant. Like they did all of these tests, right? And nothing was wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yep.
they're like, okay, she needs to go to a neurologist. So that was the next visit, right? He put all this stuff on my head. By the way, I went to the neurologist in Mexico because I was in another border. So
Yeah.
my Calen is bordered to Reynosa, Tamaulipas. So it's a different state in Mexico. But I mean, Texas is huge, right? So it was from
Right.
one corner to the other. So I was still in a border town.
Yeah.
So I was taken to a neurologist in Mexico, and the neurologist was like, well, there's nothing wrong with her. Like her brain is working perfectly, her brain waves are fine. Let me send you to a psychologist.
Mm-hmm.
So he sends me to the psychologist, and she did all this battery of psychological testing. And to be honest, I'm not sure what was my diagnosis. I just know that she didn't diagnose me with ADHD at that time. I wasn't diagnosed with PTSD, and she did an aptitude test as well. So the only thing that I got out of there was there's family issues that need to be worked through. And she gave me three options for my career. I could be an actress, a doctor, or do something in psychology.
That's that's so acting though is so like
Yeah, like
random.
how? Right? Like an actress and a doctor and psychology.
Right.
Okay.
Maybe she was like, well, you've done well at acting fine up until now. So
Maybe.
you could just go be an actress. Just pretend like everything is fine.
Yeah. I've actually questioned that, and I wonder if it's because I'm high on being an extrovert. So I wonder if that's one of the characteristics of actors, right?
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah. So then, she gave me these three options, and I'm 14, and I'm like, I want to be a counselor. I
Yeah.
didn't say I want to be a psychiatrist or, you know, something like sciencey,
Yeah.
um, because of self-esteem stuff. And maybe
Gotcha.
later in another podcast, we can talk a little bit more about ADHD and how that impacts our self-esteem. But I didn't feel like I
100%.
was equipped to do that, right? Um, so then I began to hyper focus on how do I become a counselor.
Yeah.
And so then I knew for sure that I needed to go to college, and for sure I needed to do my master's. And that's how I began my journey. I was a sophomore. No, I'm sorry, I was a freshman in high school. And since then I've known that this is what I want to do. Yeah.
That's such an amazing story. Like I didn't know that I wanted to get into mental health until I was like 30.
Yeah. And I hear that a lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it was a privilege, that I was able
Yeah.
to have that experience with a psychologist, and receive the guidance, because otherwise I truly believe I would have gone into what everybody else in my family has gone into, which is business administration.
Yeah, yeah.
And I hate math. I'm not good at math. And I would have had to be
Right.
doing a lot of that, right?
Right, right, absolutely. It's and that's so funny. Like it's funny also how our like lives started very similarly. So my parents divorced when I was 2. And
Okay.
honestly, I don't really talk about this part of my life a lot on this podcast. And so I think this is a good place to a safe, comfortable place to do that. My parents divorced when I was 2. And so, like, my mom's family was in North Carolina, my father's family was in South Carolina. So, very close also. And so, we lived in South Carolina, my parents got married, whatever. My father was like hardcore, like rock star lifestyle, like the drugs, the alcohol, he like was in a actual band. They toured and everything.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
And up until probably like I was like elementary age. And so like for like legit like living the rock star lifestyle, And my mom was, kind of into the same thing, but then once she had me, she started to slow down a little bit. And I was about 2 and my parents split. Well, my father started his affair with my now stepmom, and like my mom told me. I woke up and she was like, go, like go back to bed. And I was like, oh, like, are you sick again? Why? And she like goes and she's like vomiting and stuff. And she was like, you're just looking at me like, here we are again. Even
Okay.
I was 5. Yeah. And I was like, oh, like this again kind of thing.
Yeah.
And she was like, that was it. That's when I knew like I had to get sober for my kid. And so about 7, we moved back to North Carolina. So about 5, she started like getting her stuff together. 2, we moved back to North Carolina to get away from like all, from the lifestyle. And so that's when, like my parents divorced at 2, but it was some years that passed before I moved completely separate,
Mhm.
like, and so that's kind of when there were some things that happened, like some physical abuse, some sexual abuse in that time frame. But for me, the separation of my parents more physically was about like 7 or so. Um,
Okay.
so I mean, I was diagnosed with ADHD at 7.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, and that like there's a lot that happened in there. I did some therapy and stuff, and they were just really because I started school, and other people started noticing things, and that's when they were like, oh, maybe like we should have you tested. Now, mind you, this was what 33 years ago, so things were a lot different, in certain ways of ADHD now like and I'm gonna pause on the ADHD conversation, after this, but just the change in science, the change in counseling, change in psychology has been so tremendous because just the coping mechanisms put in place back then 33 years ago for ADHD was like hey, buy her Nintendo and let her play Nintendo after school all day, and that'll keep her busy and keep her mind focused. And now that's the opposite
Right.
of what you should do if you have ADHD. So, like now,
Right.
my little one that has ADHD, like we're monitoring screen time and artificial diets and all these kind of things that 33 years ago was like not even thought about. It was like, oh, just keep her busy.
Well, I think even 10 years ago, the approach to mental health was so
Yeah,
much different.
yeah.
I've been a therapist for 12 years.
Mhm.
Yeah, I graduated in 2012. So 13 years.
Yeah,
And I mean, a lot of the stuff that it's being talked about now more, openly, it was not talked about when I was in
absolutely.
grad school. Like, I
Yeah,
feel like even the last 5 years after the pandemic, things have changed so much.
so much. Yeah, And some of it really has been for the better in a sense of like opportunities because,
Yes.
like online courses and like a lot of things that we can do, like even like this, like having these conversations in two completely different places, like has really been something that's kind of boomed ever since COVID. COVID was, like, okay, let's think of ways that we can still be productive and do all these things, but not have to physically go places. So and part of that too is education. So, it's one of those things that there really were some kind of good things that came from it. Um, you know, more virtual options for therapy and things like that.
Right. Yes. A little bit more accessible for people. Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah,
And
because
no, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, because therapy is kind of this thing now where it's like, hey, come to therapy, and it's not so stigmatized. It's like mental health has been recognized in a way that it's kind of gearing toward normalizing, catering to your mental health and recognizing that mental health is a component of your holistic health, which, for a very long time it wasn't like that. It was just kind of like, oh, well, you're just
It's for people who are like crazy, right?
right,
Mhm.
right,
Like
absolutely.
severe things are
You're
going on with
you
this
don't have the
person.
money to like provide for life, so you're stressed and blah blah blah. Like that's not even it at all. I mean,
Right.
we do know that poverty contributes to stress, but that's not the only thing that contributes to stress that impacts our mental health in any capacity.
Yes, for sure. Yeah. Yeah. And something that I was gonna say earlier, because you mentioned your parents got divorced at 2, and then at 5 you said that to your mom. And I have a similar story. So my parents got divorced when I was 4, and I must have been 4 or 5. But my mom, I don't remember this, but my mom tells the story that
Same,
she
yeah.
was always like crying, right? She was always crying. And then one day I approached her, and I mean, I spoke in Spanish, right? So I was
Mhm.
telling her, like, basically, Mom, I don't want to see you cry ever again. Like
Yeah.
at that age, right? Like 4 or 5 years old.
Mhm.
Um, I can't remember what is the developmental um place that we're at with our self-esteem. So 3 to 5, that's initiative versus guilt,
Mhm.
right? So can I do in this world? So like taking the initiative to say something to your parents, right? And how do they respond to that? Right? Because
Right,
then that can
right,
lead into that guilt that is going to be in your life forever, which
right.
may lead you into being a people pleaser, right? So we're being modeled how to be a woman by our
Mhm.
moms, right? And that's basically like codependency, right?
Yeah, I never looked at it like that. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So I mean, I can totally relate with what you were saying. And by that age, it was probably between that age and 8 years old that I was sexually molested. And part of that
Really?
has to do because my parents were separated. My mom would drop me off at my aunt's house, at my grandmother's house, right? Because she was dealing with her own grief with alcohol.
Yeah,
So
it's crazy. I have chills.
yeah, like I
Yeah.
mean, I think like we have a very similar story. And although my dad wasn't a rock star, he was into rock, classical rock.
Yeah.
And I mean, he was an alcoholic himself. He was a workaholic and a alcoholic.
Yeah. Yeah. So really all of my childhood is based on like physical photos that I've seen. And I'm like, oh, well, I know that's me. And so I correlate that. I have a couple of like still images in my head,
Mhm.
like, and that's really all. And those still images are from sexual assaults. So same kind of, with my mom, she had people watch me, and it was people that she trusted. But probably about two, just from the picture that I have, you know, being of a child, and I later as an adult brought this to my mom's attention, and she's like, "Oh my God, how do you know about that?"
Mm.
And I told her, so you know, I have this image in my head, and she was like, "Oh," you could tell she was just like distraught, and she was like, I didn't think that you would remember." So
Wow.
one of her friends used to keep me, her boyfriend would come over, you know, and things would happen. But she said as soon as like I showed any kind of sign, like she found out something happened, the friend kicked the boyfriend out, and they, you know, nothing was ever brought to the police though or anything like that, you know. But she took action, you know, she took the action that she thought was appropriate. And then and then another incident, and I don't know how old I was here either. Probably it had to be before age 7. So this was uh like a teenage boy watching me in the tub kind of thing.
Okay.
And that's all I know. I just have that mental picture. And I brought that up to her, and again, she was like, how do you know about this? Well, at this point, I was old enough to know what was going on, you know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that, yeah, you know, it does something to you. And, you know, like you said, those very formative years
Mm-hmm.
are, and if you don't have proper treatment,
Right.
you know, it can take you, it took me to almost 40 to start working through certain things in therapy, you know, and like I've had talk therapy before where I may have brought up, oh yeah, I was assaulted as a kid, but it wasn't really until close to 40 where I like started cognitive behavioral therapy and actually working through these things that happen. And so it's I want to briefly just kind of go over this, what we mentioned, and I'll put a reference in the description so that you guys can look at it too. But it's the Ericson stage of psychosocial development.
Mm-hmm.
And the these stages of development are infancy, where you're developing your trust versus mistrust. You're developing that sense of trust or distrust.
So
Toddlerhood
the
are,
trust is about trusting the world, trusting others, but
yeah,
also trusting yourself and your voice, right? Because
yeah,
that's when you're crying for milk or your diaper to be changed, right? And do your
yeah,
caregivers show up or they leave you there
right.
for hours, right? So either
Yeah,
learn my voice makes an impact in others, so I trust that I can ask for my needs, or I trust that others will come to help me, right?
yeah, yeah. And I'm glad because I was just gonna keep on going. So I'm glad that you elaborated because, you know, sometimes it's kind of like, well, we know things, so we forget to like explain. So I appreciate you doing that. Yeah, it's like I can trust or not that, yeah, like you said, like I'm gonna be heard. Is my call for help going to be answered? You know, or am I just going to kind of be ignored? Um, and excuse me. And that's when that starts to like develop, and you know, it develops the as throughout life. But this is kind of like the starting point for this. You know,
And it's one of the things that I didn't know. And when I was working at the first private practice that I worked at under somebody else,
mhm.
she used to use this. I mean, actually, this is one of the copies that she gave me. But she explained it to me in such a way that I was like, oh, I freaking get it now. So I
Yeah,
did
yeah,
not know that the psychosocial developmental stages were explaining how our self-esteem develops, right?
yeah,
So if you're trusting yourself, then your self-esteem gets a little boost, right? And then you understand, oh, I have value, right? I have value as a person because others come to aid me and my voice um has an impact in others. But if it doesn't, and you don't
right.
get the nurturing that you need, then you start developing low self-esteem, or more like toxic shame, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And
Yeah,
the next
absolutely.
stage, it's like, it's blown my mind in the last couple of months because I'm reading this book, Healing the Shame That Binds You,
Oh,
by John Bradshaw. And he says that toxic shame starts developing in the next stage, which is early childhood, so 2 to 3 years of age. And
hmm
we're working on autonomy versus shame and doubt. So that's when we learn to say no.
yeah,
And if you get abused, right, in any capacity,
yeah,
then you're being instilled shame and doubt
right.
because your boundaries were not um, respected, right? They were violated.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, yeah, and you know, there's this kind of perception that I had as a teenager. And I realized later on that part of it comes from like the absence of my father. And, you know, sometimes when you have an absent parent, you can go one or two ways. You can go overboard on trying to get the attention of that gender, of that parent, or you can completely distrust everyone of that gender. And a lot of times you can do both. And maybe even so that you have this overload of craving of attention because of that mistrust, really, you know, that
Mhm.
abandonment and that mistrust. And it took me into my 20s to realize that correlation and to realize like, oh, like my self-worth is so low. And coupled with the fact that like I've been abused and I know automatically that people are going to take advantage of me. So I'm
Right.
just going to either take advantage of them or I'm
Advantage of
just
them.
automatically don't trust them. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. And then you mix that with ADHD,
Yeah,
right? Like where we're already seeking connection, but we struggle with it because oftentimes we don't know what people want from us.
100%.
And
Yeah.
so with trauma, you don't trust, yeah, right? Like you close up, you're walled up. And with ADHD, you're open. Like you share so many things about yourself. There's like no freaking boundaries, no containment, right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
what do you call it? Impulsive, right? So
Yeah.
it's like, what the hell? Like it's one is pulling me to be so open and the other one's pulling me to be so closed off.
Yeah.
Like, what
Yes.
do I do? Right. So you
Yeah.
end up opening up and then you shame yourself for having done it and you
Yes.
start spiraling in anxiety. Right.
Yeah. It's, you know, I'm definitely a people pleaser and an oversharer, which the people pleasing portion I've really worked hard with on boundaries over these last couple years. Um, but my husband tells me all the time, he's like, hey, just give me the straight path of this description. I will give you every little detail about everything in the room, everything about the day. Like I need you to know all the details because I want to paint you this picture, right? I need you to
Right.
see it the way I see it in my head. And so we 100% we are yeah, oversharers, overthinkers, overfeelers, or you're kind of and then you get kind of overwhelmed from doing all that and then you just kind of want to like retreat
Right.
and
Yes.
underdo everything or do nothing for a little bit because you've done so much, your brain has put so much out there that you're just kind of like I for me at least it's like I could sleep in my bed for like a week, but I have too much to do so I can't do that.
Yeah.
Like I want to go back to bed, but my brain is not going to simmer down enough for me to just lay there and not think about things. So I might as well do things and stay busy and be productive.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Because either your body is being productive or your brain is going to be making up for what your body is not doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. 100%. Yes. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
do you
Um,
want to go on the next one?
yes. So the next one is preschool, 3 to 5 years, and that's initiative versus guilt. So that's like you're doing a lot of things with your hands, like motor uh,
you're building motor
your motor
skills.
skills. There you
Yeah.
go. Thank you. Yeah, your motor skills, right? Cutting things, making art, making up games, right? Like that's when we're usually working with mud and rocks and things outside, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the question we're trying to ask, the existential question, or answer, I'm sorry, it would be, is it okay for me to do, move, and act,
Mm.
right?
So you're
So,
kind of this is focused on your kind of sense of bodily autonomy in a way.
right. And, if we, I don't know, let's say I'm drawing, what comes to mind is a snake eating something, because it's in one of those movies, The Little Prince,
Uh-huh.
on Netflix. So let's say you're making that, right? Or I'm making that, and then I come and show it to you. You're my mom, and then you're like, "Oh, what is that? Is that a hat?" And then I'm like, "No, it's a snake. It just ate an elephant," right? Then I'm gonna be like, okay, like I can do, because it's not, nobody's seeing what I see.
Yeah, that's a really good way to explain it. Yeah.
Right. And so if I do it and then it doesn't come out the way it's supposed to, or people don't see what I'm seeing, then I'm gonna feel like it's not okay for me to do, move, or act. Right. So
Yeah.
then instead of going into initiative, I'll go into guilt. Right.
Mm,
Which is
yeah.
something that with ADHD, we may struggle because we're 2 years behind in development.
Right.
Right. So
Yeah.
at that age, we may not be really good with our motor skills. So we internalize a lot of these things that we're deficient on.
Yeah.
And then we move on to school age. So that's 6 to 11 years, and that's industry versus inferiority. So
Mm,
that the existential question is, can I make it in the world of people and things? So this is when we start like joining in little groups, right? Like cliques at school, or we're
mhm.
starting sports and we're being part of a group. Um, or we're also like comparing ourselves, right? Like, oh, I can run as fast as that person. Or
Yeah.
how come I'm not getting the grades that that kid's getting, right? So we start comparing ourselves. And if we're able to say like, oh, that kid's faster than me, but I can lift more weight than him,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
Or
Right.
I'm really good at, I don't know, pitching in baseball, then I'm gonna find my place in the world of people. But if I'm constantly being pointed out either by um peers, teachers, or myself that I'm lacking something,
Yeah.
then I'm going to go into inferiority, right? And my
Yeah.
self-esteem is going to be impacted. Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so my oldest is 25. And, having him at 14, I knew absolutely nothing, nothing about raising a child.
Yeah.
And he was diagnosed with ADHD. And he has,
As
as
a
a kid,
child as well?
yep.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah. And he, like, at the time, the option was just medication. And so, fast forward to my 10-year-old being diagnosed with ADHD when he started school as well, the options are medication, there's therapy, there's all these different
Supplements.
things. Yeah, and it's like, had I known this, first of all, we already have mom guilt about everything we do.
Right.
But, had I known this 20 years ago, what I know now, there could have been so much more done
Yeah.
to kind of cater to my oldest son's mental health and being impacted by his ADHD. Um,
Yes, for sure.
yeah, and so like none of the information you just shared wouldn't have known, and
Right.
even maybe when I had my second at 18, she wasn't diagnosed with ADHD, and three of my kids were, two of them weren't, and you can see the night and day difference on their, just their focus, their grades in school, and not because any of them are like less intelligent,
Right.
but we know how hard it is. Like my husband the other day, we don't get a lot of days where we're together all day because he works so much, I work and, do all these other things. And so he was like, we were in the car a lot. He's like, will you just stop moving? And I'm like, if you notice, even now, I notice certain things like I move my hair and I talk with my hands and all these. But me as an adult, I'm looking at my son and I'm like, okay, can you just calm down? Like, can you just sit down? And then you don't even
You don't
think of
even have
like,
that capacity, right?
I do the same thing. I move
Right.
all the time. And so, so me telling him to relax is like, you relax, lady.
Right. Yeah. We're modeling, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And you just made me think about something because you said we have the mom guilt. So like now I'm thinking like, do we go through some of these developmental stages later on in life when we enter new roles? Because
Mm,
now we're comparing ourselves to other moms, right?
100%.
Like,
Yeah.
oh
Yeah.
my God, like
Yeah.
I used to have a friend that I believe that she also has ADHD, but she was a stay-at-home mom, and she would throw like this wonderful parties, like everything was like handmade, and like it just looked wonderful. And then I would do, or I still do my kids' birthday parties, and I'm buying everything already made because one, I don't have the time, two, I don't have
Right.
the patience, right?
Right.
But then like you start like guilt tripping yourself. Well, I should be doing
Mhm.
this and I should be doing this other thing instead of enjoying like your kid turned 1 year older
Yeah.
and they're being celebrated by family and peers. I'm over here thinking like it's about me, right? About
Right.
doing the things that I'm supposed to be. But adolescent years are from 12 to 18 years, and we're working on identity versus role confusion.
Mm.
So you mentioned that you had your son at 14 and you were going through your identity development, right? So
Yeah.
what the existential question that we're trying to answer is who am I and what can I be? So that's when we start questioning like what do we believe in, right? What are our likes and dislikes? Do I believe everything that my parents taught me? Like for example, my parents I grew up in a evangelical Pentecostal home,
Hmm.
which is a topic on its own, right? Religious
Right.
trauma.
Right. Oh my gosh, so much so.
Yes. And so one of the core beliefs were money is the root of all evil, right? And my
Yeah.
dad, thankfully, has always been very successful in his career. He's had periods of time where he didn't have a job for years at a time. During financial crises like 2008 when the
Yeah.
market crashed, right? Um, but one of the things that they would always talk about in my family was like, oh, when your dad started to become more or like better at his job and started earning more, that's when he began to be unfaithful to your mom. And so I had to question those things, right? Like, do I
Yeah.
believe in the same God that they believe in? And still, like, part of that journey, I had to do it in my next developmental stage, which when you don't master one developmental stage, you're going to have to be working on it at some time during your lifetime, right?
Yeah. That's a really, really important point.
What do we do if we didn't master some of these, right?
Yeah.
And although they're
Yes.
created linearly, they're not linear. You could be working at two or three at the same time.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that you haven't mastered them. It just means like you're working through them at the same time, right?
Yes.
So, for example, identity versus role confusion. Let's say that your mom really wanted you to be a nurse and your dad really wanted you to be a musician and you really just wanted to be a artist,
Hmm. Yeah.
right? But because um, you didn't master the identity part of it in those years, you decide to go with being a nurse, and then to earn money during school, you're playing at a bar at night,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So then you end up doing what your parents wanted you to do, not what you wanted. So you enter into role confusion. So the next stage, young adulthood, which is 19 to 40 years of age, I think that's one of the uh, longest ones, or when they
Yeah.
start becoming longer.
Yeah.
But that one is intimacy versus isolation.
Mm.
So the existential question is, can I love? If you didn't master your identity
Yeah.
and you start working on it here, you may end up getting divorced because maybe you married the person that your parents wanted for you. And now you're like,
Right.
this is not the person that I wanted to be with. Like, I don't even know why I married you, right? Like, just because you were the good kid in the block and my parents really like your parents, right?
Right.
So you
Right.
end up like working through that and then deciding this is not for me, right? So
Yeah.
like that's an example of when you don't master something, how it impacts you, and then how you're trying to correct it, right? But now it's impacting not just you, it's impacting the people that you're involved with.
Yeah.
Um,
Let me
yeah.
ask you this before you move on. So, do you, in your opinion,
Mhm.
could that be the same for, okay, I really don't want my life to go on the trajectory that my parents' lives went in, because I tried that for a really long time, whether it be unintentionally or, just came naturally because that's what I was raised around. I am now going to pick this person that will give me the opposite of that and not really, because this is what I want, but this is what I don't want. And so what can I do to get away from that? And I haven't, I think in this instance, because I feel like this happens a lot. It happens a lot when you have unhealthy examples, and whether that may be, your parents' divorce. And so I see how their lives went, and I don't want to, or their careers or lack of, and whatnot. I want to do the opposite, and so it's just kind of like this way to avoid, but it's still really not what makes you happy. And it's something that I experienced myself. And I had this kind of point where I was like, everything that I'm doing is leading me down the same path. So now I want to do the opposite, but I
Mhm.
still wasn't doing what I wanted to do. I was just, because I didn't know, right? Like I had
Mhm.
mastered certain things. And so I didn't know. I just knew that I wanted this to not happen. So I was going to do this. And I still ended up getting divorced.
Right. So you may have gotten lost in the role of not wanting to be them instead of
Yeah.
accepting who you are, right?
Right. Right.
And really getting to know yourself and figuring out, well, if I don't want that, then what do I do want? Maybe
Mm.
not completely the opposite, but maybe there's some characteristics of my parents that I really do like, and that's part of what I want in a partner, but I don't want this other toxic thing, right?
Right.
So I do think that in similar ways, it's probably getting lost in role confusion.
Yeah.
Mhm. Because if I look at it through the lens of relational life therapy, or RLT, which is a therapy that focuses on working with couples, specifically couples on the brink of divorce,
Hmm.
if I look at it through that lens, then I would say you can either mimic or you can react to your parents' style of, let's say, arguments, right?
Yeah.
Or dealing with you.
Yeah.
So if I want to say that around my mom, I'm reactive, but if my husband is triggering my mom's wound, then I will mimic my mom's behavior.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and that's our adaptive child that was created. I believe it's between the ages of 7 and 14 years old that
That
is
makes
being
a lot of
created.
sense. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, and that's when we have more awareness, right?
Right.
And then it's overlapping with industry versus inferiority, and
Hmm.
then identity versus role confusion,
Hmm.
right? So, um, yeah. So, if we look at it through the RLT lens, then you're doing either the reactive or the mimicking, right?
Yeah.
So I think that if you choose someone who's completely different, it's probably more of a reaction.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so then the next one, so I talked about intimacy versus isolation. So this is where we're 19 to 40 years old. This is where most people get married and have children, right? So the goal of this stage is to create connections and relationships, long-lasting relationships. And the most important event is engaging in romantic relationships. Then we have middle adulthood. This is the second to last stage, which is 40 to 65 years of age. And this is generativity versus stagnation. So the existential question is, can I make my life count? This is when we're thinking about our legacy, right? What am I leaving behind? And most people would think about it as like, okay, I'm leaving inheritance, or I don't know, some people get to have their name at an airport or a foundation, right? That's their legacy. But for common folks like us, usually it's our kids,
Right.
right? What am I
Right.
leaving behind as far as morals? What am I leaving behind as far as knowledge, my contribution to a community, to the world, right? So we're thinking about that.
Yeah.
Did I do the things that nurture others, and how are people going to remember? Right.
Yeah. And, and this, it makes perfect sense for around age 40 because that's your quote unquote like midlife crisis age, right?
Right.
That's where and I've felt it since turning 40 this year. I felt it a little bit within myself. I'm like, am I having a midlife crisis here? you know,
Right.
and especially if you suffer from mom guilt, like a lot of us do, I have to remind myself because this is something my husband reminds me of all the time. Like, you were 14 when you had this child. I have to remind myself of that because if not, I overload with the should I's and could I's and, all these things. And I think, it is partially an age thing, but it is, a little bit of also that kind of midlife and what could I have done to contribute? Well, now also typically your kids are older, right? And
Right.
so you're focusing less on raising children and more on them being adults. And now you're focusing a little bit more on your own life as to where you weren't doing that so much when you were raising a bunch of children or even one or two children because that was your role was being a mom. And so now you're kind of like myself, I'm like, oh, I have a little bit, I have three kids over 18. And so, and now I'm like, I have a little bit more free time to focus on other things.
Right.
And so, also a little bit more time to experience that guilt of, and even when it comes to mental health, had I have known this, so,
Right.
back then, what could I have done? Or could I have maybe, should I have, blah, blah, blah. And one big thing I've been talking about a lot because it's something I've been working on in my own personal life is I can't control what I can't control. And the past is something that we cannot control, no matter how much we want to, no matter how much we try. But it makes it oh so much more important to focus on your present and your future and how you're impacting the world at this current moment, because the future is the one thing we can't change. I mean, the past is the one thing we can't change, So I think that's
Yeah.
really important for people to understand when it comes to even things like these developmental milestones in myself or like in my children, you know, talking about this and learning more about it gives me kind of, okay, well, how can I apply this and the knowledge of these milestones to things that are going on in my life with my child? You know,
Right.
maybe this is why we can't get past this, or maybe this is why we're having such an issue with this, because maybe they didn't hit this milestone. What can I do to go back and kind of nurture them so that they can hit this milestone and we can move on to the next thing?
Right. And then also understand where your blind spots are, right?
Yeah.
Like I
Mhm.
can tell you for me, so I was diagnosed with ADHD at 31, right? Talk about identity confusion.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like it was like, what? I'm ADHD and I have PTSD. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
Right. So it was like, okay, like I'm doing what I should have done during my teen years now. Like now I have to figure out who am I, right?
Yes.
Um, and while I'm doing that, um, I had just had my second child, and my grandmother on my mom's side, which is the one that I was closest to, passed away. So there
This
were a
this
lot of
current,
things
oh no, not this
on their
year, right?
stage. No, so that was 6 years ago
Oh, okay. Okay.
when I got
My
diagnosed. Mhm.
that oh, that's so the diagnosis was the same year that your grandma passed. So then you
Yes.
have this and then you have this traumatic event. Wow.
Yeah, so my daughter was born May 24th. My grandmother passed away June 3rd.
Mm,
um a week after I had my daughter. And
yeah.
then I got diagnosed, I want to say around November of that year, which was 2019.
What led to that, to you obtaining a diagnosis?
Yeah, so I think there's a mixture of, I believe, a spiritual awakening that happened around that time,
Hmm.
and my consciousness, right? Just becoming more aware. I think that when a grandparent passes away, specifically, well, I believe this, your maternal grandmother,
Mm,
I feel like that, I don't know, it just unchains a chain of events, right? Like it just gets it started. Because I think I always felt like there was something off with me. I always felt like I couldn't focus as other kids, right? Like I internalized these things. I was comparing myself to others. Um, and and then I remember, like, I always like to read, but I couldn't get into reading something for school if I didn't really care about it, right? So at 14, no, even before that, I'm gonna say like around 11 or 12, I started reading a lot of self-help books.
mm,
And I used to love to read, but it was only things that I was interested in. And I could
yeah.
spend hours, right? But then when my grandmother passed away, I started noticing how hard it was for me to get my clinical notes down,
Mm,
and how other people may have struggled, but they were always getting caught up, right? At
yeah.
some point, I had about 60 notes that I was backlogged on.
Wow.
And I was seeing like 20 clients a week. Well, maybe like, no, I'm gonna say like 30. So that's 2 weeks behind.
Yeah.
That's like
Wow.
on the higher end of seeing clients. I think the recommended is 25 a week. Uh, but that's another thing that comes with ADHD, right? Workaholism. Uh,
Yes.
so I was so behind on notes, and I felt like this has nothing to do with just having the baby, because even before having her, I was already struggling. Like I need, and then I had days, this is really what led me into the diagnosis, because I started noticing, but I have a days that I'm like, let's do it. And I would complete everything in a sitting, right?
Yep.
So my thought was, am I bipolar? Like, what is going on? Why do I have
I've
this
I've
burst
had
of
that same
energy?
thought. Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And I was like, okay, some days I'm like, I don't want to do this. And then other days I'm like overdoing it, right?
Yeah. Yes.
So that
100%.
yeah, that led me into, okay, like I need to schedule an evaluation because there's clearly something going on.
Yeah.
So that's how I decided to go and get tested. Um, and I think the spiritual part of that was when my grandmother passed away. I remember it clearly. I was standing in my kitchen. My husband and my oldest were outside, and I had the baby I think she was like asleep or something. But I remember I had talked to my grandma over the phone earlier that day. My one of my cousins put the phone next to her, and my grandma couldn't speak anymore, right? Like she was just like listening, and I said goodbye to her. And probably like 30 minutes later, I was standing in the kitchen, and then I felt like this wave of like peace, and I just knew that she had passed. It was like her soul
Wow.
passed through me. And
Yeah.
then 5 minutes later, my cousin, the one that had facilitated the call, messaged me, and she's like, grandma already passed. And I was like, wow. So that started me in the whole identity, like seeking my identity, right? Like, who am I?
Yeah.
What do I believe in? My grandma was a very devoted Christian, and I started questioning all of that because I
Yeah.
started thinking about her life and all the struggles that she went through, and I was like, man, like my grandma was faithful until the end, but why did she have to go through all of these things, right?
Hmm.
So it started me to that questioning.
Yeah.
Um, and so I feel like, although I'm 37, I'm moving into 40, I feel like I'm starting that generativity versus stagnation right now because I'm like, I want to mentor other therapists. I want to, you know, pass on the knowledge that I have that I've acquired through all these years, part of it doing my own work. But
Yeah.
things like that book I mentioned earlier, Healing the Shame That Binds You, I'm like, why aren't we being taught these things? Of course, there's things that maybe they're not relevant anymore because that book came out in the 90s. But a lot of it, it's like mind blowing. I'm like,
Yeah.
wow. And what I love about it is that it has a similar psychosocial developmental stages, but for healthy shame and toxic shame. So you can see where you started developing that toxic shame.
Uh,
Yes, it's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Hmm. So, like this generativity versus stagnation, if we look back at our life and we're like, man, like I don't think I have anything to offer, or I don't think that I can contribute anything, we're going to move into stagnation, right?
Yeah. 100%. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the last stage, maturity, 65 years of age till death. So that's when most people retired, right?
Yeah.
And that's ego integrity versus despair. And the existential question is it okay to have been me? So that's when people start thinking about their life. Did I do everything that I wanted to do? Did I travel to the places I wanted to? Did I meet all the people I wanted to? Did I do the things I wanted? Right. So if you look back at your life and you're like, you know what? Yeah, I think I did a lot of things. Yeah, maybe there's some regrets, but I did most of the stuff that I wanted to, then you move into ego integrity. But if you look back and you're like, man, like I didn't do this and I didn't do that, and why didn't I allow myself to do this? Then you're gonna go into despair, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think that's I think that's really important too because actually the next episode after you I'm having a conversation with someone about their elder life and
Okay.
their focus on not not letting that happen, that stagnance, going through life as an elder and still learning how to thrive and create and do all these things that once we oftentimes get to a certain age and we go through this part and we go through this stagnance, we're kind of like, well, what else can I do? Or a lot of people, when they retire, they're just kind of like, now what?
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think that's perfect. Yeah, the very next conversation, the very next episode will be about that. So,
That's good
and I
that we
hope
got
you
into
agree.
that. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But I think this is a really good point to end this conversation. I really appreciate you going through all of those stages and um, it's the main point, which was so important, I think, for a lot of people who are going to listen to this episode, is the kind of realization that, you know, these are natural emotional stages that I'm supposed to go through. And sometimes things happen in life to where I don't fully reach one of these or more of these stages. And maybe that's a really good starting point for me, is to look more into these and see, okay, where can I start this? What stage can I start at to kind of, I want to say catch up, but to kind of continue that emotional maturity and get myself to a place where I am comfortable and healthy.
Mhm.
And I think that itself is going to be really helpful to a lot of people. Whether you can take that for yourself in your own journey, or you can take it, like I said, for me, a little bit of both, right? Like for myself, but also for my parenting, because
Mhm.
if I at 40 haven't reached all those stages, my 10 or my 16 or my 18, 22, 25-year-old, it's possible, they've
Mhm.
had this same issue, and how can I help them get through it as well? So if it's not something that's kind of like stands out to you about yourself, maybe you can apply it, to your child or your young adult, or.
Right. And to think about like what specifically can you do in those developmental stages to reinforce the healthy self-esteem of your child, right? How do you
Right.
promote the good side of that, or mastering the virtue of that developmental stage, for
Right.
sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I really, really appreciate you being here today, and let everybody know where they can find you on social media or your website, and your
Yeah.
website.
Yeah, so I am on TikTok as Nidia11. And in there, I have my link tree, so you can go into my Instagram, well, my business Instagram and Facebook, and my webpage. So the webpage is springoakscounseling.com. And yeah, and I provide therapeutic services in Texas and Florida, and I do relational coaching throughout the world.
Nice. Good to know.
Yes,
All right. Thank you for being here. We'll see you next time.
thank you.
Check us out on YouTube at Reah Higgs, ReahHagues. You can also keep up with us on Instagram at Just the Who Podcast.